point of the election of the chair. So you have me holding the chair just for a few items, so thank you. Can I just bring a few items to your attention? This meeting is open to the press and the public and will be live streamed. When you speak, can you please state your name and authority for the benefit of press and public, and any officers or guests, please also state your name and your organisation. We've got guest speakers with us today, so we'll be introducing them further later on, so thank you to them. And Roy, can I ask you to now formally start the webcast? Thank you very much. The webcast is now started. We are live streaming now. As I've said, my name is Yolan Burgess. I'm Strategy Director for Communities and Public Service Reform here at London Councils, and I can confirm that the meeting is quorate. So apologies for absence and announcements of deputies. Anna.
Right, so I've got apologies from Councillor Watson from Southwark, Councillor Lavery from Hillingdon, Councillor Laurentiera from Barnet, Councillor Currywood from Greenwich, Councillor Bulmer from Hammersmith Smith and Fulham, Councillor Ashraf from Barking and Dagenham, and Councillor Taluk Hadar from Tower Hamlets.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest? Thank you. I would just like to make a few quick acknowledgements. We've got lots of new members, which is great, so that brings lots of new thoughts and ideas into the programme. So welcome to our 23 new members to Grants Committee, but that means also we've lost some previous members, and I would just like to say thank you to all of them for all of their commitment and work. But I would like to make a special thanks to Councillor Marion James, who has served on the Grants Committee since 2018, but also as a Vice Chair for her group for 4 years. I would have to say, and this is a personal thanks, that Councillor James brought amazing support to the committee, but also like really genuinely thoughtful challenge as well, which has really helped us to shape the programme. So that's a very particular thanks from obviously members of the previous Grants Committee, but also personally from me as well, so thank you. And on to the important item 4, election of Chair of the Grants Committee for the current year. So could I ask for any nominations for the Grants Committee Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm Stringer from London Borough and I'd like to nominate Councillor Kirsch to be Chair.
Thank you very much. Any further nominations? Seconded?
Councillor Dave Leaf, actually seconded.
Brilliant, thank you, Councillor Leaf. Therefore, we have a chair, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Kirsch is now the chair of the Grants Committee for the current year, and I will now formally hand the chair over to the chair.
Thank you, thanks Yolanda, and thanks everyone. And for me also, very warm welcome to all the new members on the Grants Committee, and also to all the ones which are familiar faces. I mean, I myself have for the last roughly 4.5 years, I've sat on the Grants Committee and always enjoyed it. So I hope all the new ones will also learn this is a really important committee. Where a lot of great work is happening. Obviously, our 2 main priorities, tackling homelessness in London and across London, and tackling violence against women and girls, are 2 really, really important things. And that's the main business from what is happening in the Grants Committee. So again, for me, for all the ones who aren't here, again, and thanks, please, the ones passed on to your colleagues who have formerly sat on the committee. It was a joy working with them, and I also wanted to highlight, like Yolanda said, the incredible work, especially mentioning from Councillor Marion James, her dedication and her passion for everything related to the Grants Committee, and like Yolanda said, her ideas, her challenges and her contributions have been always very valuable, and she really had a passion for this committee and development of the committee. So it's sad that we're not having her anymore, but she has been really absolutely instrumental. So I hope you will enjoy the committee, and now the next task is having vice chairs and deputy chairs. So I would like to nominate Councillor Eleanor Stringer as Vice Chair, Councillor David Leaf as Vice Chair, Councillor Atterberg Askid as Vice Chair, Councillor Nihad Qureshi as Vice Chair, and as Vice Chair and Deputy, Councillor Gemma Mundi. Have I any seconders? Thank you. So we are all agree on these Vice Chairs? Is this agreed? Thank you. Okay, then elections at the grants. Next item is item number 6, the election of the grants executive for the 26-27 municipal year. I'm handing over for that to Yolande.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you. So we have received nominations for Executive Committee from each of the groups, and what we will do is just to save time, read those back into the minutes, so they will be in the minutes when you receive them.
Thank you. And which takes us to item number 8, constitutional matters. 7, sorry, item 7, the minutes of the Grants Committee AGM held last year on the 16th of July. So they already have been agreed, so it's for us just to note the minutes. I hope you all had a good read and preparing yourself for this meeting today. So I think if you take that as noted. Item number 8, constitutional matters. So we have 2 items here. A, we need to agree on the executive terms of reference for the Grants Committee, and also there are some items to note, but for a bit further information I'm handing over to Yolande.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Chair, and through you. So as the Chair has noted, these are constitutional items. In part 1 of the paper, you have before you the Grants Executive Committee terms of reference. These just highlight to you the responsibilities of Grants Executive Committee members. I will just highlight, for example, where that executive committee can provide further scrutiny around finances, around performance of the programme. The Grants Executive Committee also provides the opportunity to test thinking to actually then bring to full committee. So one of the things you will hear about later in one of the later items is that we will be doing some midpoint commissioning. So we will test out ideas with executive before that then comes to full committee. So the executive committee is there to actually support full committee, but also to support the team as well, to make sure that we're doing our job for you. You have the terms of reference there. There are then a suite of documents which are constitutional documents for you and for London councils. If I can just highlight that the scheme of delegation, standing orders, the member officer relations, group advisors and securing political sign-off documents have been amended to ensure consistency with references to political groups and also references to the current year. The political conventions have been updated accordingly, but with additional clarifications on roles, including the co-president and parliamentary vice president roles, and clarification on media protocols. So obviously important documents. I just wanted to highlight where those amendments and changes have been made. I would also like to take this opportunity to just note for you, these are quite big documents, which is why the pack looks really big for the AGM. You do not normally receive such a large paper pack for your committee meetings, just to give you a little bit of reassurance. Thank you, Chair, back to you.
Thank you. And before I take any questions or comments, I also wanted to add, we have a couple of people who joined online, and we have many people here in the room. So just for everybody to be clear, we try to be as inclusive as possible so people can join online and they can contribute online, but members of the committee are only, if we go for a vote, only members present in the room are allowed to take part in the voting. Members who join online can obviously ask questions and give comments, but can't formally take part in the vote. That's down to our constitutional rules.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this item? Yes, please.
Hi, Councillor Zlotowicz from Hackney. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about the Vice President. I can't quite remember the
Co-presidents and vice presidents.
The one that goes with parliamentary. How is that selected, that person?
So we actually work with, sorry Chair, through political advisors and our parliamentary officers who work within London councils to actually seek allies within Parliament, and that's done basically through political advisors and through groups. And the key reason that we have them is actually they are genuinely our parliamentary allies. It supports our work with our MPs.
Thank you, Yolande. Any other questions or comments? If that's not the case, can we agree on the terms of references and note the additional items? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you so much. The next item is the Grants Committee dates for our year 26, 27, 28. So a couple of dates have been agreed in the past, so they are hopefully in your diaries already. And there are a couple of additional dates which we need to agree on. So we note the existing dates in the diaries and we agree hopefully on the further dates. Any questions here? Comments? So can I take it then as agreed? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Item number 10 is the performance of the finished grants program 2022-2026, which the report provides members with the 12th and final update on the two priorities of the 2022-26 grants program. And I just wanted to, before I hand over to Pilar Kusa, a couple of highlights. I think really, it was a 4 years program, and I think it achieved quite a lot and amazing things. So if you look at it, we had more than 1,300 organizations across London who contributed to the program over the 4 years. We had 132,000 service users. And if you look at this, breaking it down in interventions, it's even a more impressive figure. In combating homelessness, we had more than 42,000 interventions. And in tackling sexual and domestic abuse, we had 267,000 interventions. 13 funded projects over the lifetime of the program, all in the end achieved a green rating. So again, which shows we had really good operators in that space. They're constantly over the 4 years where we scrutinized what's going on and supported the organization who deliver on our grants program. So that worked very well as we could conclude on the green rating in the end. And also, if you look at the performance indices for the first priority, combating homelessness, the final performance was just 2% below profile. And for the work, it was just 4% below the profile. So overall, a very good performance and a strong program which we delivered over the last 4 years for the benefit of our residents across our great city of London. So further, I would like to ask Pilar Kusa to introduce the report further.
Thank you, Chair. And as mentioned by the Chair, this item number 10 covers the performance of the 4 years of the 2022-2026 program. I will briefly cover some of the main headlines and highlights, and also we will be open to any questions at the end, of course. So this slide includes some of the things we are asking you to note. Some of them were just mentioned as they are the main highlights of the end of the program. Also over the life of the program, we funded 15 projects. This includes a small number of replacement commissions and some short-term extensions that were put in place during the 4 years to ensure that there were no gaps in service provision. Overall, the performance at the end of the program was strong, as mentioned by the Chair. Under Priority 1, combating homelessness, the delivery finished just 2% below profile, while Priority 2, tackling sexual and domestic abuse, finished 4% below profile. Given the scale of the program and the challenges faced by the voluntary sector over the 4 last years, we consider this to be a very positive overall result. All 13 projects that were live at the end of the program were rated green, meaning they were performing well against their targets, also meeting monitoring and reporting requirements, and continuing to deliver high-quality services with good beneficiary satisfaction. Across the 4 years of the program, it supported more than 132,000 individual users, and over 1,300 organizations were supported too. The program also delivered almost 310,000 outcomes for Londoners. This slide here provides a snapshot of performance for Priority 1, combating homelessness. As said, overall, this priority closed in a strong position, just 2% below profile. 2 of the 4 service areas exceeded their outcome targets, while the other two that performed below profile remained within the agreed 15 performance tolerance that we consider in the program. Service area 1.2, which focuses on prevention and targeted intervention for rough sleepers, exceeded its targets. This service area is led by the Street London Advice Line project, which supported more people into specialist services and secure accommodation through an expansion of non-statutory accommodation pathways. The other service area that exceeded its target was service area 1.4. This is focused on supporting the wider homelessness sector, is what we call our Tier 2 project. It's led by Homeless Link through the project London Plus, and it continued to provide training, advice, and systems support to boroughs and voluntary organizations, helping them strengthen services and improve understanding of homelessness legislation and good practice across London. There were, however, in Priority 1, some project-specific challenges. These include the ones faced by Harp Connect. Harp Connect is a project led by San Mangos, which experienced a small reduction in delivery in the final quarter of the program as staff secured new roles ahead of the program ending. Despite this, the project completed a strong and well-managed closure, including producing legacy resources for clients and holding a legacy event to mark more than 20 years of service delivery under this grant program. The London Youth Gateway project, led by New Horizon Youth Centre, finished also just below the 85% delivery threshold. This was mainly due to challenges evidencing longer-term tenancy sustainment outcomes rather than an issue related to delivery itself. The link to the full dashboard is included in the papers. It's under paragraph 5.10 of item 10 for members who would like to look at the performance of individual service areas and projects in more detail. So, sorry, I'm missing people here. This slide shows a summary of sorry, just one second. Okay? Thank you. So this slide, similarly to the previous slide for Priority 1, but this slide focuses on performance for Priority 2, tackling sexual and domestic abuse. Overall, Priority 2 also closed in a strong position, as it has been said. It finished 4%, just 4% below profile. 4 of the 6 service areas under Priority 2 exceeded their outcome targets, with the 2 that performed below profile staying within the 15% performance tolerance. One area that significantly exceeded its targets was service area 2.4. This is emergency specialist refuge provision. It's led by Agiana, and this result reflected sustained over-delivery across a number of outcomes in this case, including supporting women to develop safety plans, rebuilding their lives, sustaining independence, and stabilizing their immigration status. Service area 2.5 also exceeded its expectations. This is the service area that focuses on supporting services to the Vox sector, our Tier 2 project 2, and is led by Women's Resource Center. These results they have achieved was driven by continued high demand for training and increased outreach and engagement with London boroughs throughout the program. None of the projects delivering under Priority 2 finished below the 85% delivery threshold, which is also a very positive outcome. It is worth noting that the program continued to support from quarter 1 to quarter 16 a wide range of Londoners with protected characteristics, and this was the case across both priorities. Details on equalities figures are available in the program dashboards. Also, under item 5, we have included an update on the closure arrangements for the program. These are under paragraph 5.3 and 5.4, and the main points we wanted to highlight today is that the final grant payments are being made in 2 stages to allow for any necessary adjustments for both under delivery and under spend before the program is fully closed. Also, once the final audited accounts have been received from groups, and this is expected to happen by December 2026, officers will be able to confirm any additional underspend, and also based on that, any unallocated funding resulting from the program closure, and of course this will be reported back to committee.
Thank you.
So we have included here an example of the type of information that is available in the committee meeting dashboard, and this is an example of the information you can find in the dashboard for each project. You can see there the project overview, referral information, performance against each outcome, and also the RAC rating for each project. Similarly, this other example is from the borough dashboard that is also included within the committee dashboard. And here in the borough dashboard, you can find...
What is it?
Colleagues online, can I please ask you to make sure that your mics are muted?
Can you mute them?
Thank you.
Thank you, Yola. So these are slide shows an example of the kind of information that you can find in the dashboard at a local level. So with the borough dashboard, you have an interactive map, and for each local authority, you can click on there and you will find a list of regular activities that are delivered by the projects funded by the program, and also a list of highlights for each quarter for each project. So lots of info on what's happening in your local area. Appendix 1 in the papers is a standard item we include in all papers. It's really a reminder of our of the RAC methodology that the team uses to assess project performance. This may be particularly helpful for new members as a reference when reviewing the performance dashboards. Appendix 2 in the papers includes lots of commentary and feedback received from projects at the end of the program. It covers the wider operating environment, key challenges and successes experienced by projects, feedback on the grant team's management, and also a thank you message from many of the groups to committee. All funded projects have acknowledged the committee's continued support and investment in these services over the lifetime of the program, so you may want to see some of their thank you messages that we have included in the papers. The Appendix 2 also summarizes some of the emerging needs that were identified by the groups, which members may find useful when considering any future funding opportunities for the homelessness and violence against women and girls sectors. I will mention only a few examples of some of the challenges that and successes that the projects have shared with us. For example, under priority 1, the Heart Connect project has shared a success. They have shared lots of information about how well they have built trusted relationships with people experiencing repeated homelessness and complex needs, providing holistic support across housing, mental health, and substance misuse. Also, the London Youth Gateway, led by New Horizon Youth Centre, brought together a partnership of specialist organizations to improve support for young people, young Londoners experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Under priority 2, some of the successes that groups have shared with us include the one from AGM. They have provided intensive refuge support for women with multiple and complex needs. Also, the Ascent Prevention Partnership, led by Women's Resource Centre, redeveloped the expert-led prevention offer they have, including the introduction of a new training on working with boys and young men, which was oversubscribed. One of the biggest challenges, I would say the biggest probably, faced by the projects across both priorities was the increasing pressure on the London's housing system. Shortages on suitable accommodation combined with the cost of living and the growing demand for services made it more difficult for people to move on, and this has increased the pressure across the system and across their own work. Other challenges they have reported include the increasingly complex needs of users and also some challenges related to their workforce. So, moving on to Appendix 3 in the papers, this contains. Oh, again, sorry. I think, yeah. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Yeah. So finally, the Appendix 3 contains the annual report from London funders. This provides an overview of the activities that were delivered by this organisation through the £60,000 annual subscription that is funded by London councils on behalf of the 32 London boroughs and the City of London. In terms of highlights, I would say that for boroughs, the report demonstrates the value of the membership through services such as the Borough Grants Officers Forum, local funder forums, specialist networks, and insight events. But of course, more information is available in Appendix 3. So we've now covered all the items that members are asked to note under item 10 of the papers. The only item requiring agreement in this report is the recommendation that members agree to the London funders and a report being shared with the relevant borough officers, and this is essentially to help ensure that they are aware of the activities and support provided by this organisation. That concludes my presentation of the item 10. Thank you all very much for your attention, and we will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Pilar, so much for the presentation and the good summary of the last 4 years program. Before I hand over to questions and comments, I wanted to highlight, Pilar introduced, especially for the new members on the committee, introduced the two dashboards, the committee dashboard and the borough dashboard. The committee dashboard obviously shows all the things going on in the grants committee, and then you have the borough dashboard when you can check for your own borough what on the two priorities is actually happening there, who's delivering services. So this is a really, really useful tool, and I really would invite everybody to engage with it, to really see what is going on in your area. It definitely helps, your work on the committee to ask questions in future meetings and to contribute. It's really, really good to see what's going on the ground in your areas, or if you want to check with other areas and the committee in itself. So it's an absolutely useful tool, which I would, wholeheartedly recommend to everybody to constantly, regularly check up in advance, definitely, of all the meetings to see they are updated regularly. So it's always worth having and they're linked into the agenda, always worth having a look. Okay, then any questions to Pilar or comments? Anyone, please?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'll very much echo what you just said about the dashboard being so useful. And just a comment, as one of the members who's been here through the past 4 years, just want to place on record the thanks for the work that the officers did delivering that. I don't have any additional questions that we haven't talked about at length over 4 years, and newer members will see the level of scrutiny that we provide, but also the level of response and the depth that officers have given to us when we do provide that scrutiny. So thanks for the work over the past 4 years, and look forward to the same level of work on the next programme.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stringer. And yes, please.
Great, thank you, Jay.
Can you state your name and
Councillor
comments,
Ancelade from Croydon. So yeah, just to echo what's been said about the dashboard, I think I've sort of echoed how helpful it has been. One of the things I just wanted to sort of lift up from the dashboard was the beneficiary satisfaction feedback, which I think I was really reassured by, to see that actually a significant amount of beneficiaries felt that the programme and it had a positive impact on their lives. And I'm sure we've captured this in the sort of monitoring element, but I just was wondering if there was any sort of work that done to look at those perhaps who felt that the programme hadn't had a positive impact, what work had been done to understand why that was the case, which I'm sure we've covered, but anything we can further share on that. But just to echo thoughts and reflections on the dashboard, I think it's been a game changer. So thank you to officers for that as well.
Thanks, Councillor Collada.
Thank you for your feedback and your kind words. And thank you for highlighting also the beneficiary satisfaction. Also wanted to mention that in fact the beneficiary satisfaction is one of the components of the RAC rating, which means that it's a key part of the work that projects need to carry out and that it's being monitored throughout the program. In terms of what's being done to understand, or to make changes to improve services. Of course, there is work that is done at a project level, but one of the things that is also core to the program is to consider the user's voice in terms when you are designing your services and their experiences. So I don't know if it responds directly to your question, but considering their feedback, including the one received through those surveys, but also other feedback, from the users, and incorporating that into the services that the projects are delivering, hopefully will help, adjust services where needed to improve those ratings.
Thank you. Really helpful.
Thank you. And next question or
Councillor
comment?
Harvey, Westminster, good to be back. And the information's rather better on performance absence, so thank you. A lot of very good work being done. I'm looking particularly at the social value estimate, and if I were making an external examination, I think my question would be that it looks at relative value, it doesn't look at comparative value, and what would be done if someone else was doing it, or if other service providers fill the gap. And I think the reason for asking that is just asking how one improves. Is that something that can be looked at?
Councillor Harvey, if I may, we have Oliver Kempton, who independently, reviewed our programme as the next item, and he also talks about social value.
Sorry.
Would
That's
you
4
mind
years
asking it
absent,
then
sorry.
again?
I'll ask it again. Sorry, Chair.
No worries. Thank you. Yes, David Leaf, please.
Thank you. Just obviously reiterate the comments about the work of officers throughout the programme and also the commissions and the dashboard is incredibly helpful. Just a couple of points just to pick up on the performance management pass. It's on page 120, 121 of the packs, and it was referenced in Pilar's introduction about the two commissions which were slightly under the 15% tolerance threshold. So just looking at the Harp Connect project, obviously it refers to, quite understandably, the fact that as the project was being wound down and coming to an end, staff were seeking employment elsewhere, and that affected the delivery. That's probably something we just need to think about in terms of how the programme, it's just started, but as we get towards the end, if that is a risk that we might need to manage in the final year of the programme, should any of the commissions no longer be successful, or there be changes as we approach 2029, 2030 in the new programme from 2030, 31. And then just obviously on the London Youth Gateway project, it references about difficulties in data collection rather than delivering the sustained tenancies, and they weren't clear whether, they weren't clear whether the tenancies had been sustained because there was a lack of engagement. Again, that's something we just need to think about in terms of how we monitor performance going forward, and again ties in a little bit with the point about the evaluation programme, how these kind of issues are factored in.
Thank you, Councillor Leaf, for the suggestions.
Yeah, helpful suggestions. Thank you, Councillor. Take them on board.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Councillor Zlotowicz from Hackney. That was sorry, my laptop's making noises. That was really helpful, thank you. And yeah, just to give huge thanks for A, choosing these as two strategic priorities, and B, just the amount of work that's gone in and provided support to those organisations. I guess I've got a couple of questions. One's a bit bigger and might be a more strategic question. The first one is about, although having worked in the youth sector quite a lot, I understand why it's really difficult to get data from young people once they've transitioned and moved on. But there's also like a general question about, there's quite a lot, it's amazing dashboards and amazing performance targets and KPIs, which can have a huge, as you will know, huge burden on organisations. And actually we should be moving towards programmes in which we're supporting organisations by not having too many demands on them, and moving towards some of the principles of, like, for example, London Funders around participatory grant making, much more qualitative feedback from service users or us going to visit them rather than, you know, lots more creative ways and ranges of, and I wondered how much, and you've probably had this conversation, so apologies as a new member, but how much we might be starting to move towards that and removing the burden on those organisations so they can get on with the work. My second question is bigger, and it's like, obviously temporary accommodation, we hear it all the time across all the boroughs about the huge challenge of temporary accommodation. We can put lots and lots of money into organisations doing amazing service delivery work, but if we don't tackle the upstream causes, then it will make no overall difference. How are London councils replying or responding in a strategic way upstream to the challenges that these organisations are facing?
Thank you, Councillor Zlotowicz, for your questions and comments. Yolanda is taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So particularly your initial comments around how can we remove burdens on delivery organisations, grateful that you've referenced the work that London Funders has done in this area. We have, as each cycle the programme goes through, we do work with committee members to actually try and get KPIs more refined, etc. Might I suggest through the chair that actually this would be a really good conversation to have executive, to actually look at how we currently do performance management with our partners. Is there something that we want to do differently? We can prototype work. We've got, you know, different size providers as well, so I think that would be a really great conversation to have. Executive committee. Thank you. And in respect to your larger question around strategic work that London Council undertakes around housing, particularly temporary accommodation, hopefully you will have all seen the lobbying work that we do with you and on your behalf in respect to temporary accommodation. The work that our housing team here does, they work really closely with all housing directors around London. They've just recently started work on a programme, the Ending Homelessness Accelerator programme, where we're working with the boroughs around what innovations are there and looking at different models of delivery. So there's a lot of strategic work going on. We work closely with civil servants in MHCLG to make sure that we're working closely with them in terms of policy changes. And as you know, the Mayor also has statutory responsibilities with respect to housing as well, so we work really closely with the Deputy Mayor Tom Copley, for example, and the team at the GLA. If anybody wants more information on the work that London Councils is doing at strategic level on housing, I'm really happy to put you in touch with our Strategy Director for Housing, who is Neil Vokes. But it's a big area, lots going on. We know that the pressure that boroughs are under is enormous. So it's a key strategic priority that's clearly also coming through our new leadership, through Leaders Committee as well.
Thank you, Yolanda. Next, I take Councillor James Hockney from Enfield, who is joining us online. Councillor Hockney, please.
Chair, a very interesting and insightful report. I just wanted to ask, in terms of when you're looking at the grants, a very large share of it is just with a couple of organisations, and what we're doing to ensure that some of the smaller charities are also receiving funding.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Pilar?
Yeah, so you'll hear in a few moments about an update on the implementation of the new program, and maybe some of these will be covered in fact. So when we opened the application process for the new program, we did encourage small and large organizations to apply, although we appreciate that there are also a number of requirements that organizations need to meet to apply to this program, and also commitments in terms of reporting and monitoring. We are supporting smaller organizations through the new program. I think 3 or 4 over the 12 new projects. And what we we are aiming to do is we are providing them additional support in many respects in terms of setting up their program, outreach to boroughs, support and training in how to collect their impact and so on. In addition to that, some of the other projects that are led by larger organizations are also partnerships. So some projects deliver individually, while others are leading. We have a lead. We work on a daily basis with a lead partner, but this lead partner leads a partnership of 3, 4, and even up to 15 partners. Some of those partners are smaller organizations that are also delivering services through this program. That's another way in which we are working with smaller organizations, maybe not directly, but funding is reaching them and services are being delivered by them through these larger partnerships. I don't know if that responds to your question or if I can add anything.
Thank you.
Very reassuring, thank you.
Sorry, there was this gentleman on the end.
Sorry?
It was actually just a follow-up to some of those wider conversations about...
Can you please say your name again?
Oh, sorry,
the borough?
apologies. I'm Rudy, Deputy Mayor in Lewisham. Good to be here. I think as London councils, we need to start making the argument for front-loading some of the spending on temporary accommodation. So in this room, in Lewisham alone, we spend 90 million a year on temporary accommodation. So in this room, we're looking at about upwards of 30 billion over the next 10 years that we will be spending. So with these, just talking about addressing these structural causes of homelessness, the idea that we will spend this money it's kind of wild how short term it is. And I think as council, I would love us to start making these arguments for front loading these investments in our conversation with central government and the GLA. It was just a follow-up.
Thank you very much. And as Yolande said earlier, I think this is a good point which we can take to the executive committee of the grants committee to look at it and come back to the wider committee. Okay.
We've never really tackled the issue.
Can you please say your name and your
sorry,
council
yeah,
again?
Pat
Sorry.
Callahan, Camden. We've never really tackled the issue of older people who are living, some in 3 and 4 bedroom houses, and they've got a social circle in that area. But we need to, I'm an older person, so I think I'm allowed to say that. We need to really release those, but what we need to do is think smartly about building in certain areas specifically for older people so they can continue with their sort of social circles, etc., but not hold those houses. I've got a neighbour who passed recently. She was in a home for 20 years, 3-bedroom home on her own for 20 years. I've just managed to get a family who've got a very she's the daughter, the youngest daughter's on the autistic scale and she's quite severe. They are now going to move into that house and they've been living in a 1-bedroom with 4 children for 10 years. So we need to get smart about doing that because older people, A, don't want to pay the bills for these big houses, but they don't see any way of moving to somewhere where they will be settled, you know, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for very good points. I think, but outside the remit of what we are doing here, but we're taking this up with the housing team from London councils and the portfolio holder for housing to see, you know, how we address the points you raised. Really valuable point. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay Hedges from Wandsworth, brand new to this committee, so thank you to everyone for your hard work. I've just had a quick question about BORG grants, because also I cover the adult social care and health portfolio in Wandsworth, so I was wondering how BORG grants are supporting residents with complex health and care needs. Thank you again for your hard work.
Hello, my name's Miriam Hickey, I'm the Opera Grants programme. That has been a theme coming throughout our both priorities of the programme. and Counselling project led by Women and Girls Network. They have a wide range of partners, including counselling and support for people with mental health issues. They report obviously an increasing number of users with multiple needs, multiple and complex needs. So they are supporting them. Obviously they're not the only project in the programme that are supporting them. We also have in the Ashiana network-led programme one of the refuges is for people with complex needs. That project has three refuges and provides bed spaces for people who find it more difficult to access mainstream refuge. So one of the refuges there in particular is for people with complex and multiple needs. All the projects across most of the priorities will deal with people with complex and
It's very helpful.
Thank you, Feria, for answering the question. If there are no further burning questions or comments, given that we have two guest speakers and I think people might have questions and a couple of other items, I would just to draw this to a close. And so we have a couple of things. I mean, Pilar put it nicely on the slide, what we need to note and what we need to agree. So noting there are a couple of items, and agreeing is that the London Council officers and Grants Committee members share the London Founders Annual Report with relevant borough officers to ensure they are aware of the benefit from the support and activities provided. Can we note and agree this?
Agreed.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for all the contributions and the valuable ideas. Like we said, some things we take up with the housing team, some things we take up for the Grants Committee executive. The next item, please join me in welcoming Oliver Kempton from Envoy Partnership. He will speak about the final evaluation report on value for money, which places a monetary value on our program, which we just had a report of and discussed and debated. So also he made recommendations for future programs, and we had the social value element, which is there as well. So please welcome Oliver Kempton, and looking forward to his presentation and questions later for Oliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure about how we're doing on timings. How long do I have?
At the moment, we have planned for this item 20 minutes, but I think we can do overall 25.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for having us here today. My name is Oliver Kempton. I work for a consultancy called Envoy Partnership. We've been working with London councils for the past year to look at the value for money of the grants programme. The final report that we've written is in your pack. That's part of the reason your packs are so large today. So all the details are in there. I'm going to give you a quick summary of the approach that we took, what the numbers look like, and some thoughts going forward, and then hopefully time for questions as well that you might have. So just briefly about us, we are a social impact, social value consultancy. We're based in London. Probably about 60% of our work is in London. Most of it is with organisations that have the public sector as a major kind of stakeholder, if you like. So we work with councils like Westminster, for example. We work with developers like Lend-Lease in London, who are building in London, and various other organisations who are based here too. We also work with various charities, VCSE organisations. And we're part of the Institute for Social Value. They're kind of like our trade body. And our job here was to say, how can we assess the work that has been done on your behalf through your funding? What difference does it make to people? What does that look like in terms of value for money? Essentially, was it money well spent? There's also a point, Councillor Harvey, on the relative value of that, so I'll come on to that as well as we go. So what we've tried to do in the evaluation is place a monetary value on the outcomes that the programme achieved. We did that and then compared that with the programme cost. We followed the social value method that's set out in both the Green Book and the Cabinet Office Social Return on Investment Guide. And we looked at both priorities, which you now know well about, so combating homelessness, tackling domestic and sexual abuse, and we've got the amount of money committed to both of those priorities on there. As we worked through that, we took a number of steps to make sure that the figures we come out with at the end are robust and credible. So we adjust the numbers using a number of different factors here. please forgive me for getting into some slightly technical language here, and we'll pick up these a little bit more, but we look at dead weight, which is a slightly unfriendly term, but essentially means what would have happened anyway. So if you hadn't put the money in, what would happen to people? We look at attribution, what share of the credit can we take, given that we live in a complex society, people are complex, lots of other things affect the outcomes that arise as well. Sometimes your work and the work that's done through your funding is a necessary component of the change that we see, but it's not sufficient in itself. You need other things to be in place as well. We look at displacement, not actually an issue here, but sometimes is there a case of value being moved from one person to another? Maybe we help some people get into jobs, but it comes at the expense of other people, for example. Look at how long the benefits last, and we discount it as well using a Treasury 3.5% discount rate. Essentially, that means if you have to wait to get the value, then the value is reduced a little bit for each year that we have to wait for it. And then we place monetary values, we call them financial proxies, on some of the outcomes. And in a moment, we'll come on to explaining which outcomes we did that for. The results that come out are about social value, they're not cash flow savings. And we flag this because we're going to talk about results with pound signs on them, but that's not all money in the pockets of local authorities to spend on other things. Some of it is, but a large chunk of that is value to people, which we've represented in a financial figure. Other parts of it is resource savings to either to local authorities or to other parts of the government, such as the criminal justice system, for example. And that is sometimes cash flow savings, but often it's a resource saving, resources that can be used elsewhere. And it gives us a figure like this. We will give you a figure in a moment. I just put XXX for now, but a monetary value created. Just one other thing on that term, social value. So each of you in your local authorities will have social value commitments that you place on people that you're procuring goods and services from. When you talk about social value here, it's a related thing, but it's not exactly the same. So in that instance, you're paying money to suppliers, they're bidding for money, they're telling you about the impact they can have through the way they deliver their goods and services and how that can have an impact on, say, apprenticeships, for example. That's similar to what we're doing, but here we're looking at the core value of the delivery. So actually, what difference has it made to people who are supported by the charities we funded? So related, but not exactly the same. And just a little bit more on those terms, and I flagged this here because in a moment we'll show you a couple of worked examples, and I'm going to talk about deadweight and attribution in those. So just so we're clear on what they mean, deadweight is a share of the outcome that would have happened anyway without the funded service, sometimes called the counterfactual as well. For example, in the Treasury Green Book, we have estimated the deadweight for each outcome that we've placed a monetary value on, and so we're making sure that the evaluation is looking at the value that's created above and beyond what would have happened anyway without your funding. Usually we do that by looking at benchmarks. In some situations you can set up control groups and look at the difference. That's not really practical with programs like these. A couple of sources here, for example, so with preventing homelessness, the Ministry for Homes, Communities and Local Government, I always forget the acronym, their rough sleeping questionnaire in the Homeless Reduction Act 2017, and likewise for the securing and sustaining tenancies, looking at research by Women's Aid and the Home Office, Centre for Homeless Impact, and so on. And so these gives us figures, which we'll quote later. So we'll say deadweight was 34%, give or take. That means we knock off 34% of the value. That's what would have happened anyway. We keep nearly 66% of the value. So that's how that works in the setup. The other thing to flag is we also look at attribution. So after we've considered that deadweight question, what would have happened anyway, we still can't claim all the credit for what's left because you'll often need other organisations, other people also supporting kind of the service users to make sure those outcomes are created. This is harder to make a judgment on. We've made a one judgment throughout the programme, so we've got an attribution rate of 50% throughout. And that means we'll talk about the total value that's created, and that's when we've taken off deadweight, but not worried about this. And then we'll give you an estimate of the share of that that's attributable to London Council's funding. So that's what we do, that's how we go through it. Then we had to look at which outcomes we then placed monetary value on. And there is an awful lot of data collected by London Councils on this. So a total of 119 outcomes are collected, data is collected for 119 outcomes across the programme. We haven't gone and tried to place a monetary value on all of those, for a number of reasons, but partly because there's a lot of overlap between some of those outcomes, potentially for very good reasons. For example, you have a sense of safety outcome, and you also have a sense of safety for the LGBTQ community. Now, those two outcomes are exactly the same, but they're related, and we're not trying to value them in different ways, essentially, here. So we do a couple of things. We bring some of those outcomes together, and we also look at which outcomes are what we call intermediate outcomes and which are final outcomes. Essentially, what we're saying is some of the change we're seeing, some of those outcomes, they're important because they lead on to the final change, the final outcome. Whereas other outcomes, the final outcomes, they're valuable in their own right. So it helps us avoid double counting by counting both the process by which somebody achieves where they're getting to and the end results as well. So once we've factored all that in, we end up with 16 outcomes we've placed a monetary value on, and there's a further 7 that are final outcomes, but we haven't placed a monetary outcome, usually because there's not sufficient data around that for us to do so credibly. So, for example, there's outcomes about resolving immigration status. We haven't placed a monetary value on that one. So that leaves us with 16 outcomes that give us the value that you'll see in the report. And what does that look like? Well, firstly, there's just under 25 million pounds of funding committed to the programmes. The social value attributable to the services comes out at just over 160 million from those calculations. What does that mean? That essentially means that our best estimate of the value created through your funding that you can take credit for is about 160 million. And that 160 million has changed people's lives, it's resource savings for local government and national government and the like. So that's what that means. All of this is based on a model. That model is based on inputs. We've discussed some of those. All of those can be challenged and discussed like any kind of economic model, if you like. So the way I would describe this is our best estimate as to the value that's being created. What we haven't done in this report is given you a ratio from one to the other. Now you can all put 163 divided by 24.88 on your phones and come up with a ratio for that. Why have we not done that? We haven't done it because the way this is set out is building an outcomes framework across all 32 boroughs plus City of London, and for both priorities and for a number of different charities. The result of that is there's a lot of organising it to make sense across the whole of London, essentially. I think as a result of that, it would be rather different if you looked at individual charities and built a framework for each individual one. And it also means that we've done the best with the data that's there, but there's a question about how hard we want to push the answer, basically. So our view is that actually this is a good way to describe it. Putting a ratio of around about 6 to 1 on it probably slightly pushes what we can say with the data. It's saying you could say essentially we get £6 for every pound invested, but is the data strong enough to hold that? Not quite sure it is, and that's why we haven't done that. What we've done for you here, though, is broken it down by priority. So again, the amount committed, the total value created, and the value that we're taking credit for. As it happens, those two priorities, the amount that we get out there, those ratios are roughly the same. And who benefits? So participants hold the largest share. I imagine that would be a good result. The largest impact is on people who are affected by these issues. Through improved mental health, safety, housing stability. I know we had a point about housing already. But the public sector also gains, so local authorities, temporary accommodation, homeless costs being reduced, NHS, crisis health demand, and so on. So those are the overall figures. I think there's a question from Councillor Harvey as well about the relative value of these. What I'd say is that when we've looked at other SROI or similar type of valuations in these sectors, the numbers come out broadly similar. On the other hand, if you look at a lot of analyses, they do end up with higher results. I'll be honest, I'm sometimes a touch sceptical about the credibility of some of the work that was done behind those. So certainly with our approach, we've been quite conservative on some of the estimates that have gone in. So I think you can sometimes see optimism bias creep into these kinds of programs. So we've been careful about that. Also, if you looked at kind of government green book analyses, for example, you'd often end up with lower ratios, but then they're measuring different things and not trying to capture those broader social outcomes all the time in the same way. So I guess kind of in answer to that question, I'd say that this is coming out as a good ratio. How does it compare with other ways of doing the same, delivering the same thing? I'm not quite sure, and you've got a speaker later from one of the organisations. But I think one of the things that from our broader experience, and not specifically from this evaluation, is that it does help organisations when they have knowledge that they're going to be funded for a 4-year period. That stability can make a big difference in the way that they are able to deliver their programmes. So I think that's a consideration.
There's no right way of doing it, so thank you.
There's lots of hopefully ways, yeah. A couple of worked examples then to show you how we end up with some figures. So we're looking here at preventing homelessness. We started with a figure of the cost of rough sleeping. That comes out as a little under £15,000 per person per year. We've estimated with this, and drawing on some of the evidence available, that actually if we're preventing an episode of homelessness, that's probably about 6 months on average. That's an example of the inputs into the model. If you change that, obviously the results change. So that's based on the available evidence. And the data you have shows that 2,430 people were helped to prevent eviction. So what does that look like? A cost avoided of about £7,370 per person across 2,430 people. And then looking at dead weight and attribution. So we flagged these already. We keep 55% of the value when we look at dead weight, and then we keep half of it, again, through attribution. These are compounded on top of each other, so we knock off 55%, and then we knock off 50% of what's left, essentially. And that gives us about £2,000 of value per person supported, so it comes out at about 5 million in total. That's one worked example here. Another one that's slightly more complicated here, because this is about securing and sustaining tenancies for people experiencing domestic abuse. And we have 3 potential counterfactuals here. So essentially we're saying there's 3 different things that can happen to people in that situation. Option 1, they experience further abuse. Option 2, they move into temporary accommodation. Option 3, they end up homelessness. And that's drawn on research done in the sector about the different routes people go through. We use that research to estimate what proportion end up in each. Actually, people end up in more than one of those situations. We've simplified it a little, so it's kind of 1 route per person, essentially. And all of those have costs attached to them, which you can see there. 1,719 survivors helped through this. Again, that gives us a blended avoided cost. So when we kind of the weighted average of those 3 per person, number of people helped. Again, we factor in dead weight attribution. That's a slightly higher value per person, closer to £3,000 per person, about 4.9 million in total across the board. That's one of the more complex ones because we've got those 3 different routes. I think even within this, there's there's a materiality question about how far we go with building things in. So there are other components of these journeys that aren't included and aren't monetized. So there's always an option to say we could build in this, we could build in that as well. So finally, from me, having done all of that and come up with those results, we also have 2 things left. One of them is recommendations for future programmes. So we've got 4 recommendations. One is about collecting dependency data. So both of those 2 priorities, the children of people affected experience value as well. And we could have come up with estimates for how many children were affected, but actually if you have data on dependence, that would be helpful as well. That would help make that more robust. Secondly, suggesting a kind of 2-tier outcomes measurement approach. So a lot of in fact, all of the outcomes that are collected, they're collected on a binary format. Did we experience this change or not? And that makes sense. That a lot of situations, it's also simpler, but for some of the particularly important outcomes and the ones that hold a lot of value in the model, having that on a distance travelled sense would help us with the estimates. So if we know that rather than how many people feel safer, what proportion feel safer, if we know how safe did they feel before, how safe did they feel afterwards, that makes our results more robust. Thirdly, looking at some of the data requirements and whether some of that can be simplified and kind of reducing the duplication, if you like. Now, some of that will make sense for other reasons that you have that don't directly affect us doing the value for money, so there may be good reasons, but actually can we slim that down a little? And then just priority 2, can we look at physical health measures within that as well? So these have been fed back to the team some time ago, and I know they've been looked at already. And then from our perspective, next is a standalone value for money framework. So the idea with that is that for the programme that's kicked off now, 26 to 2030, we're going to give you something that would allow you to come up with some of these value for money estimates as you go, not month by month, but perhaps every year, if you like, rather than needing to wait until the end of the 4-year cycle to get those kinds of things.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Hope that's interesting. Very happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Oliver, for the comprehensive presentation and again for the even more comprehensive material in our pack. Thank you. I just double checking before I open for questions. Councillor Harvey, is your question answered?
It is indeed. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Oliver? Yes, please.
I'm Sam Foster in Southwark. Thanks very much for the presentation. I think it's slightly hard to get one's head around exactly how you assign financial value to things that are not financial, and there's obviously judgment has to be exercised in that, and it's something of an abstraction. And I was just wondering if there are other ways of measuring social value that were considered and not used that don't involve this assigning of a financial value to something that does not have that is not financial essentially in its essence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main ones are around cost effectiveness, and that's essentially where we're looking at the value created. That's where we're looking at the units of outcome divided by the cost, essentially. So how much does it cost us to create 1 unit of outcome? So what might that look like? How much does it cost us to get one person off street homelessness and into accommodation? For example, it costs us £3,000 per person, and comparing that. So that's one way of doing it. With a cost effectiveness approach, you generally need kind of one core outcome that you're then measuring across the board. And that makes it slightly trickier in a situation like this, where whilst you have just 2 priorities, and those 2 priorities have clearly got shared focuses, nonetheless, the outcomes themselves are a little bit different. So you'd end up with and it's not necessarily clear how much funding went to achieving that outcome as opposed to this other outcome, so it makes that approach a little bit more tricky. That's the main difference, essentially, either that cost effectiveness, where we're saying how much does it cost us to create an outcome, or some kind of cost benefit, social value type piece, where we are putting a monetary value on the outcomes.
Thanks for that. I think as a follow-up around the same kind of a thing, so because it is something of an abstraction, it makes it a bit hard to judge just based on the numbers whether this is actually good or not. So, you have a much higher number assigned to the social value created than the amount that was assigned to the grant, so obviously that seems good, but because of the abstraction involved in creating the number, it almost feels as though there's a pound sign in front of it, but it's like points or something, where you've just kind of assigned a number to something in order for it to be comparable across loads of different outcomes. So in terms of how we assess the numbers in the framework or in the reports, how are we to judge whether this represents good value for money or not?
So I think probably there's 3 points, I'd say, and some of this is just my opinion on what you might consider. So this aspect of it is suggesting that it is good value for money, but that's looking at an economic appraisal approach, essentially. I think alongside that, you'll have other things to consider, such as what were the objectives of the programme, who were the target audiences, and to what extent did you achieve those objectives and reach those target audiences. That you're covering as well, separately, so I put that alongside it. And then I think there's also the kind of qualitative feedback as well. So what case studies, what stories, and I know some of this is captured more broadly as well, but that other kind of a real life element. We try and make sure that the numbers here reflect that kind of real life experience as well, but you're absolutely right, these are slightly abstract pound signs, they're not the stories of people who are organized. So I would say bringing those 3 things together can be helpful. What I would say is that I think it's good to be slightly sceptical of any approach where we're putting people's well-being, their safety into pound signs. We do it all the time and still remain slightly sceptical, but I think that's helpful because otherwise we can run away too much with those numbers and think they give us a whole answer. They don't. What I would say though is that decisions are made all the time based on numbers that are there. And part of the benefits of an approach like this is it allows us to make sure those numbers capture more, not quite everything, but more of what's going on rather than just looking at the finances. So it helps us step away from a question of what's the way to reduce the cost of that we have as local authorities, and that's our own priority, if you like. We also look at the impact on people, so it helps bring those 2 together.
Thank you. Councillor Mansfield, next, please.
Katie Mansfield, Richmond. Thank you very much. I saw the examples and I could see how they are very clear in a tangible sense when somebody's in the situation and you're preventing something. I wanted to understand a little bit more how it can be used when you're comparing a prevention approach. So we talked a little bit earlier, we heard about how we were oversubscribed with working with young boys in prevention of VOG. So if you're talking about a prevention approach, how do you financially compare investing in that part versus something that you can quite clearly see has a direct impact? And second part of the question is that given societal changes at the moment and how we are seeing in that instance there's a lot more fear and a lot more risk of young boys getting influenced with online and perpetrators of VOG. How do you then address, when you're looking backwards, making those kind of metrics of assessing what percentage of people might go into that when it's changing quite considerably in society, and just want to see how we can then use it to make the right decisions going forward.
Thank you for the question. Oliver?
Yeah, great. Two very tough questions there. So thank you for those. I'll do my best on them. So you're absolutely right. Now the prevention v cure, if you like. I think we've heard lots of times, haven't we, that organisations, governments, or whatever tier are going to invest more in prevention and so on, and perhaps it doesn't quite happen. And I think part of that perhaps is it's much easier to make the case, as I think you're alluding to cure type approaches rather than prevention approaches, exactly because the data is less strong and you're making more of a forecast about what would happen. Practically, how do we do it? It's largely about creating estimates for the amount of change that you've prevented happening, if you like. So use the boys and girls example and boys. If you take a certain type of intervention, how much does it reduce their likelihood to be perpetrators of violence, for example? Anything like that is always drawing on evidence of perpetration rates from people who want exactly the same and more general and so on. I think generally it works a little bit better at a population level. When it's very small groups, it's a little bit harder because the data is always very different and you're talking about small groups of people and there's more nuances going on, if you like. In terms of the modelling the maths, it essentially works in the same way. It's just saying as a forecast as to how much stuff we've prevented rather than how much cure we've created, to stick on that analogy, if you like. Do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah. So and I can see how you can do it on the population as a whole, and what percentage. But if the societal changes are happening and we're seeing those instances fluctuate potentially, it's very difficult to then map the value as it could be now versus what it might have been if you look at the last 5 years.
Yeah, and often it's because the national data or regional data that we can use to benchmark against is a year out of date because it takes a while for those stats to come through the system. Absolutely. And so if we're seeing very rapid change in society, and therefore those numbers, it means the data we're using is out of date more quickly, and so there's more of an uncertainty around it. Yeah. And on those specific examples, so I think everything we did here was looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, was looking at survivors rather than perpetrators of domestic abuse. So we did look at that area of it. It's sort of a really important question. Yeah, I think the other approach you can take is try to move away from those national figures and work with organisations on the ground about what they're seeing there. It's only ever going to be an estimate. So yeah, we're not going to solve that problem essentially. I think we just have to model it responsibly in a way that recognises those uncertainties.
Thank you. And Councillor Harvey, you have another question.
I do, thanks. On page 18, you do mention positive approaches. I recognise they need to be very rigorous indeed if you go into units and value. Can you say a bit more about how they might be applied in greater depth? And find sort of way back up something like this.
Yeah, qualitative approaches, did you say? Yeah, so talk about qualitative approaches. Essentially what we mean there is talking to people in a much more open, discursive way rather than here's a survey, was it 3 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or whatever. So it's moving away from the statistics and looking at kind of the stories and the kind of discussion. How do they help us? Sometimes they can feed into numbers directly, but that tends not to be the way that we're using them. It tends to be more about understanding the drivers of change and helping us with considerations around things like dead weight and so on. So if I go back to one of the work examples here, these 3 counterfactuals for people who are survivors of domestic abuse. So those 3 different routes, we took the figures out from another report, but in that report, I'd have to go back and check it. That was done by working closely with survivors and discussing the journeys that they've gone through, for example. It's not just here's 3 options, tick the one that happens. It's about understanding those stories. Likewise, when we then come on to the counterfactual, we've got a dead weight here of 65.9%. Now, generally, when we're doing stuff like this, you don't find a statistic that says exactly your outcome and how much would have happened, and here's a number for you to lift. You have to look at, well, what was the journey that led to this outcome? What part of that journey is a key part of the journey that you can say, well, would that happen anyway and led to these outcomes? So it's really about understanding the story so the numbers can reflect the reality. That's the core part of this, I think.
Thank you. Taking one last question from Councillor Zlotowicz. Sorry.
Sorry about my surname. Gets everyone. So Councillor Zlotowicz from Hackney. It might be a bit of a follow-up question to some of the others, but I suppose I was just going back to thinking about the root causes issues of some of these, of the strategic priorities, whether that's changes to the manosphere in the sexual abuse, sexual violence situation, and then the other thing with housing. Some of these organisations that this grants programme has been funding do have a kind of lobbying, campaigning, policy work area, for example, New Horizons, as I think they used to. Can the outcomes that we're showing value for money for also include those secondary order, like those more policy lobbying outcomes to also demonstrate social value that they might have, rather than specifically about individual? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So if we look at the kind of advocacy policy, sorry.
Sorry, just to say. So as you said, many of the projects that are funded through the program do advocacy work. However, our funding, or London Council's funding through all boroughs, is focused on delivering services, not funding that advocacy work. We do receive information from projects, especially when they submit their quarterly returns, and they tell us more about their work, about some successes they have achieved around advocacy, but like the funding is focused on that, and that's why there are no specific outcomes related to that.
Yeah. But it would be an added value, wouldn't it, if we were funding organisations, even if our specific funding wasn't doing that, it did enable parts of their service to do policy and lobbying. Just not funding it at all, so you can't include it.
I think the question is how is the learning captured, right, from the programmes that we're funded, and how does that contribute to those that do advocate?
So some of the learning has already been implemented in the new programme which started this year, and also further, I think we will take further recommendations and discuss them at the executive meetings.
I suppose it's also whether it can actually be shown as a value, as a social value, the advocacy lobbying part of an organisation, even if we're not directly funding it. I'd be interested for future.
I mean, in theory it can be.
Yeah.
Practice is really hard.
Yeah.
And because all of the complexities that we've discussed, and kind of men from Richmond talking about like how we forecast what's actually going to happen, that's all true. The attribution, why did the policy actually change? There's lots of factors in that. And then looking at a policy change and what does that look like when it cascades down into kind of action, often that's going to be complicated. So you in theory, you can follow it through. I think we managed to do it kind of once. But realistically, I think that the numbers you're going to come out with, they're not going to be robust enough for being able to put like results like these ones. Where are they? Yeah, I don't think you can come up with something like this from it. It's just the precision that you have in it is too much uncertainty, I think. Doesn't mean it's not important, but I think capturing it this way is really hard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. And say from following up from one of the recommendations, we might see you in roughly a year's time again for the 1 year update on where we are with social value on the current programme.
I would love that, but I think that's of course you should discuss what I've got in
That's
the
why I
room.
said might. No, thank you so much. This was really, really helpful, and I think everyone else seemed to have found it really beneficial. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving to our next item, which is the current programme, item number 12, a quick update there. There are a couple of items to note, and I just wanted from the chair to highlight, obviously, the programme has agreed in the last 4-year cycle of London councils, and all the projects have already started to deliver. But there is an interesting part, in realising that obviously it has been agreed in the last cycle, and we are now in a new cycle and just started. There was deliberately a 1.5 million put into a mid-term programme, on funding in order to give new members a chance to influence where we go with the two priorities in the programs and what we want to support, but also making us more flexible. A 4-year static program seemed we came to the conclusion over the last 4 years not ideal in a way. You obviously you start things, but you can't really adapt to changes potentially. So hence we have the opposite of the 1.5 million mid-year program. So in the executive we will start soon to discuss, where are the ideas, what could we and officers work with us and the people on the executive committee, what are additional priorities or what else we would like to look more or fund to be that, have that agility and that flexibility mid-term to react in how we adjust or adapt the program. And one of the suggestions here is, again, by revisioning the budget, there's another 143,000 which we could add to the 1.5 million, which would then take us to 1.64 million, which we could in mid-term allocate and being agile and flexible. So I think that's something really positive as a change and lesson learned from the last 4 years, that we have that agility mid-term to adapt our program. Any further highlights from Farah on this?
Thank you, Chair. As said, my name's Firia Henry. I'm one of the directors on the programme. This is, I'll keep it short and brief, a brief update on the implementation of the new programme, which is 2630. I do have some introductory slides, a reminder for the members who were here for the last 4 years, but also sort of some quick background for those new members. So at the July 25 committee meeting, Grants Committee agreed recommendations for grant funding for the majority of Priority 1 and Priority 2. There were some later decisions on the Service Area 1.1. Those decisions were delegated to the programme panel and agreed in September 2025. So as said, this paper is updating members on the work done by the team. We did an update in the last Grants Committee in March, so this is the work done between March and now to launch the 2630 programme. As I said, this is some background to that new programme. It continues to focus on the two priorities supported in the 22-26 programme, combating homelessness and sexual and domestic abuse. At the moment, £22.9 million has been invested. Priority 1 had an envelope of 8.8 million and Priority 2 an envelope of 14.2 million. As the Chair said, there remains some allocated money, 1.5 million plus the additional 143 million. The idea is to keep that at 143,000, not another 143 million. I wish. Nice. Apologies. Sorry, I got your hopes up there. But as said, I'm repeating the Chair, but that is a new feature in this programme to add some flexibility, and discussions will begin in autumn with the grants exec and be ongoing. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, these are the service areas under each priority. You'll hear us refer to service areas as we go on. So there are 3 in Priority 1, which focus on adults and individuals in temporary accommodation, targeted intervention, and providing alternative pathways to secure housing for adults. 1.2 is for young people, and new to this programme is particular emphasis on care leavers, and you'll hear more about that in the next item, the presentation from Horizon. And 1.3, you'll hear us also refer to second tier groups. So that is working for the sector to provide support and training. Under Priority 2, there are 5 priorities. They are up there. The biggest one, as you can see, is the specialist advice, counselling and support. 2.
Sorry, I don't know why it's going.
Okay, sorry. So and then we have a range of services, refuge services, and also a second tier group led by Women's Resource Centre providing support and training to the sector, and also borough professionals also avail themselves of those services as well. So this is the part about the unallocated funding, which the chair referred to before. Through some of the work that we've done to finalise budgets, we've managed to reduce some of the budgets by 143,000. So if that is in the committee's gift, I presume to add to the 1.5 mid-programme pots. And we will come back to committee as discussions continue about the ideas for that pot. So going on to the actual work that the team has been doing since the last report, we've now concluded the pre-agreement process, and all 12 grant agreements have been issued. Projects have started delivering from the 1st of April. We have some of the things that we did. It's quite a large pre-agreement process. We were reviewing activities, outcomes and budgets, which is where we've managed to reduce some of the budgets, where we've queried some of the funds that were put in them and had to refine them. So it's quite a long process, and we've come to the end of that. We've issued the agreements. We've also built a new monitoring portal. So at our next committee, you'll begin to see the first and second quarters of that monitoring will be in the new portal, and links will be provided. We've delivered training on the portal because we've got quite a few groups in the programme, and also new members of staff in the existing projects. So we've had quite a few training sessions. We work with our partners Super Highways, who helped us deliver the portal. We also had some drop-ins sessions while in the middle of the first monitoring period. So the deadline for groups, first one is Friday. We have staggered reporting dates. So the smaller non-partnership groups report on Friday, and the larger partnership groups report on the 24th. And our first performance report, as said, will contain data for quarters 1 and 2, and we'll be bringing that to the November Grants Committee. I think that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Feria. Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hi, Councillor Gwengra, Deputy Leader of Brent Council. This might have been a question for the previous item actually. I was just interested as to whether or not any considerations made to the terms and conditions of some of the staff who work for the organisations listed. In particular, there's a couple of charities listed in these papers where there's been industrial action that was quite prolonged in the last few years, and terms and conditions in the charity sector can be really tough at the moment. And obviously if workers go on strike, that can affect service delivery for some of our more vulnerable residents. So I just wondered, is that built into the decision-making process? Do we prioritise living wage employers? And if there is a strike situation, what leverage do we have as a commissioner of these services?
I'll be happy to take the question. Are you happy to take the question?
I have to say, we haven't prioritised minimum living wage providers in the past. We assess the budgets, and we will query some of the issues around wages and payments, and we have done that in some of the budget discussions that we've had with groups, so that has been the case. With regard to industrial action, yeah, we did have a couple of organisations within the programme, in the 2026 programme, that had industrial action. They kept us informed, the management kept us informed as to what was going. We had discussions with them about delivery in that time, and they had to tell us what provisions they were making to provide services within that time, and also if there was any shortfall, they are contracted to make up that shortfall when the induction session is over, or as you can see at the end of the programme, they may be subject to a reduction in funding if they haven't met the targets. We do, as obviously as London councils, encourage workers and management to reach a conclusion, but we do not get actively involved in those discussions, but we do keep abreast of industrial action.
Thanks. I think it would be worth considering bringing the living wage forward as one of our as part of our decision-making matrix, because if we're looking at trying to get people into secure accommodation, I mean, one of the biggest barriers to that is low wages in London. We know that a lot of people in temporary accommodation are actually in work. As somebody who spent most of my career in the charity sector, we do meet a lot of employees who are on terrible wages, frankly. I'm thinking in particular there was protracted industrial action focused on homes and shelter, as some of those workers were really on the front line. So we should be thinking as well, what can we do as an organisation to promote well-paid work, because that also contributes to the homelessness crisis.
Thank you for the question. I think we just had with Yolanda. We can take this away and go back to all our service providers and ask them what they actually are paying, and do a survey there and bring that back to the committee.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Chair.
So then we have a question from Councillor Rudi Schmidt from Lewisham.
Thank you. And definitely. So it's really welcome all the work that's going into homelessness responses. And something that comes up again and again for me in casework is neurodiverse residents who are accessing homelessness services not getting their needs met. And in many cases, I don't think we're fulfilling our duties under the Equalities Act. And actually, I've looked into it, and research shows that up to 18% of rough sleepers and people experiencing homelessness are autistic, comparing to 1 to 2% of the population. So I'm just wondering how our programmes that we're funding are going to be improving outcomes for neurodiverse residents, and then also how that learning is going to be shared with others and will shape our local authority policies and ways of working. And I also have a second question, if I may.
Really quickly, because we have another question and then we need to move on to the next one.
I can just make it as a comment then, and just further to what you were saying from Camden, sorry, I've forgotten, I didn't catch your name, but I'd be really interested in how this 800k we've got on innovation, how we can look at funding research or pilots in some of these areas where we've got large family homes that are underoccupied, how we can start to unlock those and we can start to see a chain of houses become available.
On the second part, I think we already said we're taking it up with the housing team, but to your first question, would like to answer that one.
So in terms of how we are supporting users with mental health issues, so I would say all or most of the projects in the program have an outcome related to supporting users to improve their mental health on the one side, and we get evidence on that. So that's a key area for projects. But also in relation to how we can support also boroughs to better deal with these users. Under both priorities, we have what Fira mentioned, a Tier 2 project, which is a project supporting the sector. Under Priority 1 is Homeless Link. The project name is London Plus. Under Priority 2, the organisation leading that project is the Women Resource Centre. So we can take, I'm sure Homeless Link does specific training. They carry out specific training on how to work with clients that have mental health issues that are neurodiverse. So we can explore that and come back to you, and we can share around this information on specifically what is it that they are providing in terms of training. Their training is open to both borough officers and the voluntary sector, and that's only one of the kind of training they carry out. They deliver all kind of training. They are really good, as well as Women Resource Centre. We can explore also if there is something specifically that Women Resource Centre is doing in that respect to focused on violence against women and girls. So that could be a good resource that is being funded through this program that any borough can make use of.
Thank you, Pilar. A very quick follow-up question from
Just
Councillor
a
Schmidt.
slight clarification that, and you did mention it towards the end. I was talking about neurodiversity rather than mental health.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry
That's all
about.
good. But yeah, I think it would be great to get that information on a bit more detail on what we're doing to target support for people with autism and more broadly neurodiversity.
I'd be happy to take that away and look into it. Thank you. Last question on this item from Councillor Leaf, please.
Just sort of one small observation and then a question. So firstly, obviously, our role on the grants committee is predominantly around governance of the programme and carrying out those kind of checks and information. I'm sure as members progress and spend as many years on the committee as I do and learn more about the grants and the programme, there's lots of areas that we want to do more on, we want to talk about, lots of areas of policy we want to influence, but we need to kind of try to stay quite focused on the programmes itself and how they are delivered and have that assurance around the delivery and the impact. And again, leading into the conversations earlier, making sure that we are confident that the indicators that we put in place and the monitoring processes are robust but also not overburdensome. So just a kind of a little bit of observation, having spent many years on this committee on that point. My main question was around the delivery and the rollout. Obviously, it's very early days still, but we know some of the organisations we've commissioned are old hands, very experienced experts in the field, but we have got some new providers that we've commissioned and some smaller providers as well. So just around how we are managing the risks, because we know for those new providers coming into the programme and also the smaller providers being able to engage with us, being able to roll out the programme, get up and running. I just wanted to hear a little bit about how we're managing those risks and supporting them to get on with the delivery, because we know in the first year delivery is going to be more challenging for them than some of the more established groups.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, for your good observations and thanks for the question. So handing over to
we have been aware of this, and we, as a team, we're trying to arrange visits as early as possible to especially the new groups, prioritising them. My colleague in the room has visited two last week and had some very positive feedback on two of the new groups in the programme. We will be spreading those visits out. We're also encouraging the team to do some calls in between quarters just to check in and see how they are. We'll also be having a cross-priority, what we call, sorry, all this jargon, we call it a cross-priority group, but basically it's a meeting of all the projects in the programme. We're hoping to have that in September, so we'll bring all the groups together and we'll discuss any difficulties that they have had. But I think we are aware that, and I think that was some of our learning from the last project when we had difficulties with a newly funded organisation. So we are sort of across that and trying to visit and keep in touch in between monitoring visits. But the aim is to visit every group in the programme in the first year, and then ongoing by risk assessment basis. I didn't add in my presentation, in the attempt to keep it brief, that we are doing lots of rollouts with the borough officers and our other networks to tell them about the new groups and what we're doing. We had a meeting with the full coordinators in late April as a kind of soft launch of our P2 project, where they all came and presented and met our officers. And we're going to have a similar one for the P1 providers in early September. And we've been sending out summaries widely. We're updating our website as soon as possible after the meeting. And I forgot to say there's a summary of all the projects. Most importantly, there's a summary of all the projects at the end of item 12. So, and there's contact details in there with further details.
Thank you. Thanks, Feria. So we still have 2 items to go, and one is a guest speaker as well. And so I assume we might end up not at 1 o'clock, but I would suggest, if everybody's happy, that we try to aim to close the meeting at 1:15. There's also lunch provided for us. So can we note this item? There's no decision, just to note the report.
Noted.
Thank you. So then please welcome to Hannah Siolek, who will speak about the London Youth Gateway project. She is the program manager there. And so very warm welcome and looking forward. So they are one of our providers and commenced in the new program and commenced their work in April of this year.
Okay, thank you so much. I have got my notes because I was listening to what people were saying around different things to do, tenancy sustainment, neurodiversity needs, how we look at that. So I have kind of altered this in my head as we go. I'll try and answer some of those as well. So my name is Hannah Jurek. I am the Programme Manager at New Horizon. You may have heard of us. We're a day centre based in King's Cross. We are the lead partners in the commission. And yeah, I'm really excited to speak to you about the commission that we're going into, just to thank you again for your support in previous commissions. We've done lots of learning, lots of development. We've looked at the real successes that we've been able to achieve with your support previously. We're adapting that and continuing it in the commission that we're about to go into. I'm aware that some of you will know a lot about London Youth Gateway and the partners that I'm going to speak about, and for some of you it may be new, so I'll try and keep it quite brief, but if there's any questions at the end about specific partners or specific details, do let me know. Sorry, okay.
Oh,
No, it's okay. So I'm just including this slide for New Horizon staff. You may see one or more of us in the future. I think we've met some of these people in the room already. So as I mentioned, I'm the programme manager. I work specifically on this programme, which is great. It means I can have real focus time. I'm based in the centre, so I also meet young people every day, whether that's just having lunch with them or sitting in on their cases, listening to what's going on at the triage function, which means that I'm very much in the service delivery as well as operationally. Polly, as we mentioned, sort of how different organisations might have a policy element to them, including campaigning, which isn't necessarily funded by London councils, but definitely is part of the work that we do. And Megan, who's our Chief Operations Officer, and she supports the role as well. So the LYG, London Youth Gateway, in case you are new to this meeting or you've not heard of the programme before, we are a sector leading programme which is pan-London. We deliver services to either prevent, reduce or resolve homelessness for young Londoners. We work with young people aged up to the age of 25, so we include young adults within that, and our mission is to make sure that young Londoners bounce back from homelessness if that is a situation that they find themselves in, but ideally we offer that sort of preventative intervention as well before we get to that point. The London Youth Gateway is made up of 9 London charities and voluntary organisations, and we work very closely with the young people that we serve to achieve long-term stability and tenancy sustainment for them. The programme since 2013 has interacted with 62,000 young people, so that just shows what a need there is for our service, but also that is a number that we realise none of us want to hear, because it shows that there's that many young people that are experiencing homelessness across our city. So the programme focus, I'm going to go a little bit into detail around what each individual partner delivers and how this fits into our overall outcomes. But just a summary of, not only do we offer housing and homelessness advice, which is our core service, young people that come into the London Youth Gateway have a housing need, that is the way they interact with our service. But we also provide the holistic support around that, which we recognise is crucial to resolving homelessness long term. So we look at life skills. We acknowledge a lot of young people, if they haven't had that family support, things can feel really overwhelming in terms of managing debt, bills, all of the sort of admin that goes into maintaining a tenancy. We have a really strong health offer, so that would include mental health support, counselling services, substance misuse services, as well as, for example, New Horizon, we have an on-site nurse, so it means that if we see a young person come into the centre and they want to have an on-the-spot appointment, they can do, which we recognise is actually really unique in terms of services. And I'll speak next about the partners and how what they deliver fits into this. So some of these partners are coming with us onto the next commission, and some of them are also new. I'll speak a little bit more about the new partners and why they've been included in this commission specifically. So apologies if you know these charities already. I'll be quite brief when I talk about them, but again, if there's any questions, do just let me know at the end. So AKT, they are a specific LGBTQI+ charity. We have worked with them previously. They deliver amazing work. They can offer slightly longer term interventions for young people. We are noticing from their feedback that they are receiving quite a lot of referrals from young people with complex needs that are intersecting many different protected characteristics and have lots of different barriers for facing homelessness. They're able to provide that specialist support. We've heard from young people themselves the difference having an LGBTQI+ caseworker makes when they interact with the service. They also can deliver remotely, which means young people who have neurodiversity needs are also not excluded from interacting with them. Centrepoint, they are new in this commission. They provide a really useful and important phone advice service. They are able to offer that one-off advocacy housing advice, something that will hopefully empower a young person to resolve their homelessness quickly by themselves, or potentially just have a bit of information that will stop them get to the point of experiencing homelessness at all. Core and Voice, they are new into this commission. They deal specifically with care leavers, so they're really crucial for us when we're meeting our new outcomes of supporting care experiencing care leavers. I'll go into that a little bit more later on in the presentation, but just to acknowledge that they are a real critical new partner. DePaul have previously worked with us. They offer the Night Stop. I don't know how familiar you are with that emergency accommodation, which is really important when we're meeting rough sleepers. And they also provide substance use support, which is really important when we're looking at that holistic wraparound support of preventing homelessness long term, as well as just accommodating somebody. Greater Change are a non-reporting partner. They are new to this commission. They provide match-funded grants to support young people to maintain accommodation or tenancy. The funding can be applied for by any of these organisations, but what we ask for is that they will think about how to use that money innovatively and creatively. So there's lots of grants available, for example, care leavers to acquire white goods once they have a tenancy, but Greater Change asks us to think a bit more than what a young person needs rather than just items. How can they feel at home? I'll just give an example of this. We applied for a grant for a young person who needed dentistry work, and it might seem like that's not at all related to homelessness, but it absolutely is. A young person who is experiencing severe tooth decay, tooth pain, that is going to take over their day-to-day life entirely, and it will stop them getting into work, not to be able to focus on education. So actually for them to have teeth that are healthy and working, the long-term goal for them is going to be able to help them to maintain tenancy, find accommodation, all of that good stuff. New Horizon, where I work, we're a day centre, open door, we have lunch every day, we have showers, we have laundry service, we provide housing advice and support. We also have an outreach rough sleeping team. We're the only rough sleeping team who works specifically with young people, which is a really important offer. We recognise that young people's needs, especially rough sleepers, are different to more entrenched older rough sleepers that we see. We also know that when we're talking about women and girls, when we're talking about migrants, they rough sleep in a different way. It's a lot of hidden rough sleeping in cafes, buses, things like that. So that's a service we're really proud to be able to offer. And we also have the health and education, employment and training as well on site. Praxis, they are a migrant and refugee charity. We work with them when we see that a young person's homelessness is due to an unresolved immigration need. So that might be, for example, that they have no recourse to public funds. We're also seeing more and more young people who are born in the UK, never left the UK, assume they're British citizens, family breakdown, they go to apply for benefits, whatever it might be, and find out that along the line they actually don't qualify for British citizenship, and then that results in homelessness. So those kind of complicated cases where the barrier is immigration, we can refer over to Praxis. And we've worked with them for many years, and they're great. Settle, they're new in this commission. They work with care leavers and care experienced young people. They are an organisation that can provide coaching and mentoring, as well as grants and support to not just accommodate somebody, but for them to make them feel like that their house is their home, not just somewhere to stay. We're also really lucky to work with Settle because their offer is widened out to young people that don't have family support. Maybe they've been missed by the care system for whatever reason and not picked up by children's social care. Arguably they should have, but they're in a position where they kind of fall between the cracks. But we can support them through the work that Settle do. Stonewall Housing, very well established, we've worked with them for many years, another LGBTQI+ charity. They do have access to housing as well as housing advice and that short-term intervention. And we would just acknowledge that working with all of these partners just really strengthens the offer that we can deliver to young people. When we're looking at young people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, there's not just one reason that they're in the position that they are. All of these intersecting experiences contribute for them to be able to resolve their homelessness long term, and we know that being able to work with multiple services really strengthens the offer that we can deliver in general. So there's a lot of statistics here, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I mentioned that we are working with 2 organisations focusing on care leavers. The reason behind that is when we've looked at past learning and past delivering of services, care leavers are a rising group of young people who are, the percentage of care leavers experiencing homelessness is increasing. So I just wanted to pull out some of the statistics on there that 18 to 20-year-old care leavers who are homeless has increased by 37% in the last 5 years, and 67% of care leavers are already homeless by the time they contact their local authority. These figures represent the national picture, but I think it's really important because we are seeing in the centre and across talking to partners, in London specifically, we're seeing care leavers leaving the cities that they have that they seem to have priority needed and coming to London. There's multiple reasons for that. To give a few examples, we're seeing care leavers who are migrants who have been placed somewhere where they're experiencing extreme racism and discrimination, and they come to London because they feel that that's a safer area for them, which means that we are seeing a lot more care leavers from London and from other areas as well. Next slide, thank you. So what do these figures tell us? They tell us that care leavers are not accessing services that they're entitled to, or they're not being provided the support that they need once they're leaving care. We often hear about this care cliff, which I'm sure you're all familiar about or familiar of. When a young person reaches the age of 18, we had a quote, I think the charity Become, working with a young person who felt like it was on death row. They were counting down to when they had to leave their accommodation and all their support is going to stop. And that is a very vulnerable time for young people who have care experience in becoming homeless. This is why we're including these 2 new partners in this commission and also collecting data and outcomes specifically for care leavers to make sure that our service is meeting their needs. I think it's also important to pull out some of the wins in our sector. So when we speak to care experienced young people, we look at what the figures have shown us of why care leavers are experiencing homelessness at a higher rate. It is due to this care cliff. We know that young people in care are now often moved out of borough, out of city, far away from their communities due to cost or housing availability. That then means that, for example, a young person who is grown up in London but then is moved to somewhere up north, when they then look to claim or look to find accommodation, they might want to return back to London. Previously, the local connection offer didn't allow that, but we are very glad to say that in July of last year, the exemption was made that care leavers can approach different local authorities because we recognise that they will have been moved around because of the experience they've had through no fault of their own, and actually to keep them in the communities and around friends and family is really crucial in their stability. And I've mentioned just the outcomes as well. So learning from previous commissions and how we've implemented it into the commission we're going into now, we recognise that resources and access to everything at the moment has become more and more difficult. So rather than competing across different organisations, we actually have so much more success if we work together for the young people, but also for delivery of a service. We're responding to need. I pulled out care leavers specifically, and we've also spoken about the tenancy sustainment. Previously, we were reporting on 12 months tenancy sustainment as well as 6 months. As Pilar mentioned it when you spoke in your presentation earlier, it was really difficult for us to evidence 12-month tenancy sustainment, not because young people were not being accommodated for that long, but it just brought up a lot of ethical concerns around contacting young people once they have exited a service. Young people have experienced probably the worst experience of their lifetime, and they have managed to resolve that and come out the other side of it feeling very much as if they've resolved that, moved on positively. Don't then want to be contacted 12 months later. So there's that. Also, the transient nature of homelessness in young people is very difficult to track a young person for 12 months. Whereas in this commission, we're really glad to see that we've got the 6 months tenancy, and actually we can evidence that a lot more easily and more appropriately for young people, and it also just shows the impact of the programme as well. Also, we've improved our data collection. We don't do any sort of proxy outcomes anymore. So, for example, if a young person accesses our counselling service in-house, we won't then make the assumption that their mental health has improved. We'll actually then do the surveys, do the one-to-one assessments, actually evaluate their experience rather than us just assuming because they've interacted with a service that means that everything has got better. This means that all the data that we show London councils is very much true of the experience of the young person, and we feel really confident that in this commission we can show some really great work that's happening. I've mentioned a little bit about the services looking at different needs of young people. So not only are we a truly pan-London offer, we're able to do that by remote work as well as our in-house services like the day centre. We also recognise with the emerging need of neurodiversity that not every young person can come into a physical space. So when we think about a service like DePaul we work with, a young person is able to get remote support. And also we've recognised that that just increases engagement with women as well. There's not less young women who are experiencing homelessness, but we might not see them in the centre for all the reasons that everyone in this room will be aware of in terms of safety, or if they feel like a service represents them or not. For them to be able to speak to us on the phone, it means that they actually still get a really great service and support from us. We've also found that centres can be quite overwhelming for neurodiversity needs. So being able to do that pan-London offer, remote work, creative outreach we call it, we meet young people where they are, means that no one is excluded from using our service either. I suppose how I will then promote the service across the London boroughs is I attend homelessness forums. I visit, last week for example, I went to the DWP in Wandsworth and delivered a session there for their young people and just really encourage people to engage with ours. I'll show you on the next slide how young people can refer in. I don't know if we've got time to look at the website, but it's up there in case people want to look at it later. Young people can refer in through the website, and the website itself has been designed with young people. We held a session at New Horizon with young people who've experienced homelessness recently, and they made decisions on everything from how the website functions, what the photos look like, if it felt like it represented them. We also acknowledge that the increase in need of our migrant service users. We are now at around 50% at New Horizon, which is not historically at the split of our service users, but that is where we are now for lots of different reasons that we're going to now. But we also recognise that there's an increased need for translation and interpretation services. So when you go on our website, it can be translated into our most used community languages as well, just to make sure, like I mentioned, we're accessible to everyone who might need us. Yeah, and I think that's kind of rattling through it all, but if there's any questions.
Hannah, for showing what the London Youth Gateway is doing. So thanks, and all the charities working this year. Any questions for Hannah? David, please.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. I was just checking through some of our local data on care leavers, and a couple of thoughts kind of crossed my mind. I think one of the statistics you showed about the percentage of care leavers aged 18 to 20 facing homelessness going up by 37% over the last 5 years. On the top there. Just wanted to check on, in terms of obviously us as local authorities, we have a responsibility to support parents up to the age of 25. So I'm just curious, and again it ties with the point earlier about the care cliff that was mentioned. At what point is that care cliff evidenced? Is it more than this kind of 18 to 20 years, or is it at that 25? Because we often find challenges when they hit 25 if they haven't had that period of being obviously a challenge. I was curious as to where that age point is.
Yeah.
How you engage with local authorities around that, and whether yourself and the providers are looking at providing those links into councils for our personal advisors and the charities that we work with locally again to provide that support to get into that more prevention space, so that number isn't as high, and people, when they face that cliff edge, it's not daunting as it currently is.
Yeah, exactly. So I will say, I'll try and remember. So the cliff edge itself is normally that 18-year point, and the reason for that is a young person might be accommodated, for example, in a foster family, who at the age of 18 actually say, we can't accommodate this young person for any longer. Maybe we have younger fostered children who actually it's a safeguarding issue when somebody becomes an adult. So it's that sort of staying put that we call it isn't always there for a young person, and that it means that when they get to 18, if they're not engaging with their personal advisor or the offer from their local authority, they might feel really that they don't have the options there, that they need to become independent, and they feel like actually still 18 still so young, and they might feel that in themselves. So that is that point. I'll just mention what you spoke to, that there are obviously care leaver offers within every local authority and every borough. We're not there to replace that service. They're really well established and they're really robust to support young people, but we would be working with those boroughs to ensure that young people know how to access the care leaver offer. It might be a communication issue, that young people might actually have lost contact with their personal advisor, so there might be a bit of a reconnection piece there as well that we can support them with. Working with Core Invoice and Settle, Core Invoice are more sort of the advocacy piece of work there, so they would take on those casework that's needed for a young person, so working with their social worker, working with their personal advisor to hopefully resolve any issues there and then. And then, as I mentioned, Settle would be around that tenancy sustainment support, so if a young person actually has reached that point of resilience, independence, where they're able to move into their own property, we know from the partners we work with that's not enough, that they need all of the support around them as well. It's not just enough to put a young person into a flat and say, there you go, that's where things can kind of unravel. Sort of on point, a little bit off it, I suppose relating to care leavers, mental health, young people in general, we also acknowledge that when a young person is placed in a property, that's often when their need increases rather than decreases, because they've been in this survival mode, they've had to go through all of these different experiences, and they've finally got to the point where they feel they're at the finish line, and actually a lot of the stuff catches up with them. So that's why we make sure that the local offer is there, that we're there, just to make sure that they know what's available to them. And also that's really important, as you mentioned, speaking with us to make sure that we're up to date with any changes, because there are great care leaver offers out there, we just need to make sure that we're all aware of them and linked up to them as well. I think that was another question.
Also, Yolanda wanted to come in on what you mentioned, David.
Thank you very much, Chair. And so, Hannah, it would be really good to introduce you to some colleagues in the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance who've been working with all of the directors of children's service across London to develop the care compacts. I think your learnings will help them strengthen the care compact. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Slotowitz, please.
Sorry, does anyone else put? Alright, I'll go.
I saw your hand up, so
Yeah, no, I know. I just
now.
wanted to check that because I have asked some questions. Yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased that we're refunding you, and I'm a new member, so just joining in. Great that we're funding you again, because I love the work that you do. I think it's so important, and so thank you so much to everybody there. I guess my question was actually, and you may have been asked this as part of the end of the last funding, and it's really great that we're able to offer in the ways that you have been this long-term funding. Is there any feedback that you would like to offer to us as a new members of the grants committee about our funding practices, other funders that might be doing things in a more power sharing way or a participatory way, or anything? Or I don't want to lead you down that road, but or anything that you think we could do differently in the future?
Yeah, I think actually what's really great for us is to be able to share the narrative piece around the figures. So when I do the reporting, it is part of that, and I would just say, if there's an opportunity to look at that against the numbers, it's really important, because it gives so much more information around the current climate of the housing sector as well. So if I just pull out some of the outcomes and I guess the explanation that I would have around them, and why it's great to be able to share that with everyone in the room. If we were to look at 4 years ago, the amount that has changed within that time is absolutely massive. So we might have outcomes in the previous commission relating to employment, and at the end of that commission that might have gone down quite significantly. But what I love the opportunity to be able to share is why that is. So for example, I mentioned we now work with 50% migrant and refugees, and that is to do with the move on period from the Home Office massively reducing. So we saw a lot of RIF sleepers, and it was actually the first time, I think ever, if not in decades, that New Horizon had to close because we're so overwhelmed with young people. But that would show in the jobs outcome is that those young people are not in a position where they can enter the workforce. But what we've been really dynamic in doing with London Council support, and me emailing Pilar a lot about this, is that we can increase our education outcomes, for example. So we can say, okay, these young people are not able to access work currently, but maybe we can use some of our resource internally to provide additional ESOL, which we have done, and actually has increased our education outcomes. So I suppose what I'd say is behind the data there is always a narrative piece. For every quarterly report I will write that and partners will feed in. So in terms of dynamic reporting, I think that is really useful. We find it really useful. And if there's any kind of along the years, these kind of presentations I can do, I think they're also really helpful just to share what's going on and how it's looking in terms of on the ground delivery. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I think this was really valuable and helpful for everyone, having that first-hand account from and showcasing the work you guys are doing. Thank you so much. We have one more item before some closing remarks from you, which also the one is the item number 14 now, which we're looking at the provisional pre-audit financial results for London Council Grants Committee for 25-26. So I'm handing over to David Sunny. David, can you please make it very, very brief? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Director of Corporate Resources at London Councils. So the report included in your pack presents the provisional outturn results for the last financial year. It reports a modest surplus. There are offsetting variances within that, where grant expenditure and operating costs are offset by additional income from the investment returns held by the committee. There are a couple of requests in there for members to approve changes to reserves, and this follows on from discussions we've had at previous meetings regarding reviews to be undertaken in respect of the committee's reserves. There were two aspects to that work. The very first one was looking at the minimum level of reserves in relation to the risks associated with the administration of the new programme, and the second was just assessing how much support would be required for the implementation and delivery of the new programme that started. The review of the minimum levels sort of followed the guidance provided in SIPFA, and that's obviously the same methodologies that's used in your local authorities. And the outcome of that showed that the minimum level should be increased by about 1.5% of the annual budget, which equated to approximately £100,000. With regard to the second element, there are a number of activities which are listed out in Appendix B of the paper that can be carried out to support the delivery of the new programme. That includes engagement events, other work to support the mid-programme commissioning, such as research and market warming activities. There are some systems development costs, as well as work to ensure there are no sort of equalities and accessibility gaps. So I guess in addition to those two areas, there was a residual balance on an earmarked reserve in relation to the premises move, as that move has now been completed. there is a request to return those funds back to the general reserve. So conscious of time, I'll stop there and answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks, David. And again, my apologies that we have not that much time left. But again, thanks for a really good detailed report. And any questions for David or comments? Yes, please.
It's a very basic question, perhaps, and it might just be my misreading of it. But so there's a surplus of 2,000, but
Yes.
there's a use of 40,000 of earmarked reserves.
Yes.
So I guess what's the difference there between using 38,000 of earmarked reserves and just not having the surplus, if you know what I mean?
So I guess in terms of using the reserves, one of the reasons why we use reserves, some of the reserves are used for a specific item. There were some change management costs that had been incurred, and I think it was 14,000 worth of reserves that was used for that. There was some also earmarked reserves, and the reserves that have been used were all earmarked. There's no general reserves that have been used. The other earmarked reserves was was in relation to the slippage of the programme. So that was where there'd been a sort of delay in spending, and reserves had been earmarked to manage that when that expenditure arose in the previous year.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? If that's not the case, we have to note a couple of things and approve the increase on the minimum level of the reserves, the transfer of the under 32,000 earmarked reserves, and the residual balance of the 4,000. Is that in agreement? Thank you so much. And again, thanks, David. I'm really sorry that we have not much time left. So I already told everyone we have lunch prepared for us outside this room. So I hope you might be able to stay and enjoy lunch and have a bit of time to talk to each other. But before we come to lunch, I wanted to say a huge thanks to all the 2022-2026 grants providers. And on behalf of the Grants Committee, I would like to thank all of them and their lead organisations and their partners for the work they have delivered on behalf of London Council's Grants Committee. And I wanted to extend from the Grants Committee's committee members and the team our thanks to all of them. And I would like to thank all our officers from London Councils who helped us over the last 4 years on that programme, and also have been here today helping us with this meeting and the agenda and everything. So thanks a lot as well. And really, my last thing before the lunch is for our next meeting. It's really important. We won't have the meeting here, and I hope to all of the online, I always understand why people join online. I pretty much joined quite often in the last couple of years myself, but the next one we have in Toynbee Hall on the 25th of November. And it's not why I'm saying it's not here. The important bit is it's not just a meeting outside. It is a meeting which is also will have our formal launch of our 26-2030 program there. And we have a lot of our providers there with stalls, and they are there to showcase what they're doing. They are there to have conversations with us where we can directly engage with them and ask questions. So it will be not just our launch, it will be also a brilliant opportunity to engage with our providers. So I hope you all can make your diaries clear for the 25th of November to come in person to Toynbee Hall, and also all our grants, our borough officers who support their work on the Grants Committee are invited as well. I would like to encourage you all that you make sure or encourage the officers to come there as well, because for them it's also a great opportunity to talk directly to our providers and have that direct contact, which again helps in making all the work even more efficient. And so I hope I see you all in person and your officers on the 25th. And now thanks again for today and enjoy the lunch.
Thank you very much.